Welcome to episode 6 of the Cold Rush podcast. You have with us Caspian and Eric Wiegand. We are delivering you some information about reference selling. What do I mean by that? Is this logos? Is this your network? It's a little bit of both. And it's whatever is going to get you that warm intro and make it a little bit more relevant for the companies that you're speaking to. As we all know, cold outreach is really hard. We've talked about it in episodes before. Cold outreach is dead is kind of BS in our mind, but it's certainly harder than it's ever been. Before we get into all of this, though, let's give a little bit of the background. Caspian, how about you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Pumped to be here. My name is Caspian. I am former SDR, former sales engineer, current account executive. And so I've, kind of been in a variety of individual contributor roles, providing that boots on the ground perspective for current sellers, former sellers, prospective sellers, and pumped about today's topic, right? Simply put, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And that is true in more ways than one, definitely when it comes to sales. I'll turn it over to you.
Yep. So I'm Eric Wiegand, similar path, SDR to manager to head of sales, founder, everything in between. Right now, running Anthro Test Labs, which is go-to-market engineering. So any sort of automations that folks need, and I won't spoil it just yet, but launched a new endeavor, which we'll be covering a little bit later in the episode. So really excited to officially come out with what I've been working on with a co-founder for the past couple of years. But before we get there, let's talk about reference selling. What is it in your mind there, Caspian?
Yeah, I think reference selling is, I was being a little tongue-in-cheek earlier, but it is true, right? The age-old saying of it's not what you know, it's who you know. We talk a lot about cold outreach, and reference selling gives you a door into how you can make that cold outreach a little bit warmer, right?
Yep.
Can you get a warm introduction? I'm sure we've all seen this in different parts of our lives, but whether it's, in sales to getting a job to dating, right? Like it's just nice to have a known entity, if you will. And it's like, even in examples as silly as like trying a new restaurant, right? If you or looking at new restaurants and you're like looking at 3 different ones, and then I tell you, hey, I've been to XYZ and it was awesome. Depending on what you think of me, you might be more likely to try that restaurant, right? So I just think reference selling allows you to make anything cold that much warmer, and puts you in a way better position to succeed. But I'm curious your take on it. Like, how do you think about it?
Absolutely. I mean, the adage in sales, right, is know me, like me, trust me, right? And you're only going to buy from somebody who you've reached that level with and can act as that knowledgeable, consultative seller. And at the end of the day, how do you kind of skip some of those steps? It's being referred by either a person that you know, or in your salesmanship, using customers that you already have that fit that company profile and are looking for solutions that are similar to them, whether it's their competitors, whether it's other similarly sized companies in their space, whatever the case may be. And so when we can create those jumps over, and we'll go a little bit more into where you can look for those people and how you should position that, but if you can jump those steps, it's not a cold email, it's not a cold call, it's something where we can make those connections earlier, and it's just going to speed up your sales cycle. Hopefully it lowers your cost of acquisition, all the bells and whistles. And we've seen, right, the research shows that those trusted connections just lead to bigger deals. They lead to faster deals. And so, if you're not out there doing it, you probably should be, right? So, Caspian, like, how do we actually execute this reference selling when it comes to either your network or, making those calls and referencing those logos?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think there's a lot of different ways that you can, I think there's a lot of different ways that you can go about this. Uh, One, and they're kind of like on different sides of the spectrum, at least in my experience. One, of course, is if you have a happy customer, right? Or someone who you have built a strong champion and maybe the deal has just closed. I think it's always nice, like as you make that handoff from maybe your sales team to your customer success team to be like, hey, Eric, it was such a pleasure working with you. Just curious, now that you know more about XYZ company, do you have anyone in your network that you think could benefit from what it is that we do here, right? It's a pretty like straightforward, simple ask. You've earned that ask throughout the deal cycle, right? You've closed that deal with them. And they might tell you no, which is totally fine.
Yep.
Most often, people will say, yeah, there's a few people that come to mind. Let me check with them.
Hmm.
Even if out of, 10 conversations like that, you get 3 people who actually wind up following up and each person only gives you one reference.
Yep.
Doing some simple math, let's say you have a 30% close rate. From those 3 potential connections, you have an extra deal, maybe on a monthly, a quarterly basis that you wouldn't have had if you didn't ask. So that is one way that I've gone about it in the past. The other side of this is, as odd as it might sound, when you're not a fit for a prospective customer. And what I mean is, not necessarily if you lose the deal, right? Or if you're like late stage and you lose to a competitor or, whatever the case may be. But I always like to set the precedent in the beginning of discovery calls of like, hey, if, we can, always set up more conversations. And if for whatever reason, this doesn't make sense, we can part ways as friends. If at the end of that discovery call, it's clear that whatever they're focused on is kind of outside the scope of where you can help, I think it's a pretty innocent ask. If that deal isn't going anywhere, right, and you haven't spent too much time on it, you're like one discovery call through, but like, hey, Eric, it sounds like what you're focused on right now isn't really a fit in terms of where we can be helpful. I'm curious, based on what we talked about today, is there anyone that comes to mind that might be able to benefit from this, right?
Totally.
I want to be upfront. Lower success rate on that for sure. But again, I always think about it as like, hey, there's nothing more you can lose, to be honest, right? Like you're not gonna, if that deal isn't moving forward, that's totally fine. You're early enough, you haven't spent a lot of time on it. There have been scenarios, I can't speak too in depth about this, but there's a deal that's currently in funnel that is a direct result of this, where it's like, we weren't a fit, but I asked, and they wound up introducing me the very next day to someone who we probably can help, right?
That's amazing.
And so those are the 2 instances that come to mind, as different as they may seem on paper. What have you found helpful in kind of your experience?
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's like all different avenues that you can pull this from, right? I think like a very tried and true method is like if you have VC funding, to go to your VCs and ask about other portfolio companies. Just saying like, hey, like you have a vested interest in seeing our growth and success. You obviously invested in us because you think that we're a valuable tool. Can you introduce us to other portfolio companies that would, benefit from what we have to offer? And we'll get in a little later as to like how you do this, because I think that there's a very tactful way that you can accomplish this. And it's not just being like, hey, anybody in your portfolio, because a lot of these people are busy. And I think this applies across your entire network. The thing that you don't want to do is, for the most part, like, hey, can you think of someone? You
Yeah.
want to do your due diligence to find those people, to write the messages, to make it as simple for these people to make the introductions as possible. The other one would be like other employees in your organization. And again, like I'll go through how we actually do this, but other employees, right? If I sell, let's say, I don't know, you're at Numeric, you sell to accounting folks.
Mm-hmm.
Asking the accountants at your organization or the accounting firm that you use or whatever to be like, hey, do you know anybody? Is a great way to do this. Usually leaders are at your organization are like very good, whether it's like the CEO or the CFO or whatever, just because they've typically like been in the sphere for a longer time, and so they might have those connections already. Past coworkers, friends, right? And just as you reference, happy customers that you've already sold to. these are all really great ways, and just like networks that you can tap on the shoulder and say, hey, listen, I'm doing this. I would love some support. And a lot of times, they'll make those intros. Like I said, I have some things in the future of this episode that I think will be pretty useful, and strategies that I've used, but I'll save that for a little bit. But from here, I kind of want to go into like, what are the tools that you've been using in order to accomplish this?
Yeah. Well, the tool that I think comes to no one's surprise is one is LinkedIn, right? Where it's looking at literally who are people connected with, right? I think there's a couple of good things on LinkedIn you can do. One, of course, is team link intros, right? That's to your point of to find out who people at your own company may know. You can use Team Link within Sales Navigator to see, if we work together, I could see, oh, Eric, you're connected with XYZ controller at this company, and I'm trying to prospect into them. Hey, how well do you know this person? Could you make an introduction? And you can take that really to like the nth degree if you really want to. I think that you can get creative in terms of looking at connections of connections. Ideally, the closer that connection is, the better. And what I would say, I would actually challenge people before getting overly creative here, is I would look through your own network. A lot of times, we might be connected with people that we don't know. That's totally fine. But a lot of people, this may sound obvious, but it's very few people that know literally everyone in their network off the top of their head. And so you may have people within your network that you're like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that, you might know someone in one capacity, like in a social capacity, and wait, they're, the head of sales at XYZ company, and maybe you sell to sales teams. Of course, you want to be mindful of blurring the lines between personal and professional relationships, but there's a lot of people that are probably open to at least entertaining a conversation that you may personally know. I think then looking at team link connections, and then there's also some great companies out there like User Gems, where you can find, to your point of kind of dipping into past happy customers and finding people that may already be familiar with what it is that you do. There's a lot of opportunities to get an understanding of like, oh, Eric was at this company when they were using my product. Now he's at another company. Let me reach out to Eric because there's that social proof already built in, right? You may know the name of my company. Not everyone's going to be a champion. Not everyone's going to be, maybe have loved or been a power user of XYZ tool, but it's always a great place to start. So that's kind of where my mind initially goes. But I'm very intrigued to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah. I mean, I think you hit some good ones. Like LinkedIn is great. I have a little hack that I usually like to use, which is specifying the connections of a person. So like when I was referencing before, you have a leader at your company, you have a past customer, you have, a VC. Looking through and using Sales Navigator to say connections of this person, and then going through and finding that information out is a really good way, because you can add like all of your ICP criteria. You can add, any sort of filters that you want on LinkedIn Sales Nav and find those people. And the key here, and you touched on it, is like the hardest thing about being a salesperson is you've connected with a ton of people. You don't know who the hell they are.
Yeah.
And so team link connections and this and that, like for the most part, are destroyed when it comes to like mine and probably your network, because it's just like I probably know a third of the people, if that, right? Because I've just connected with all these folks. And so
You're too popular.
right. Well, I just want friends, They don't.
We all do.
They don't want to be my network, but I want them to be mine. And so the problem is that like you've just like blurred the lines of like who's real and who's not. And so finding those people at your organization, at a VC, identifying those people who maybe haven't burned their network to the ground on LinkedIn and putting them as the connections of is a great way to reach out and find people that actually know each other and can make those introductions. And I think that that's like really important. You had mentioned user gems. I think that that is great. Like, hey, you've been a champion. You were a power user at an organization. You've now made a move. I think it's really a great way to use that and say, hey, listen, well, we worked at your last organization. Why wouldn't you consider us now? Great way to actually like pull that forward and just keep reaching to the next company, next company, next company. And you can actually accomplish that in LinkedIn Sales Nav. I think we were talking about this before, but you can say like there's a checkbox and I forget what it's called, but it's like past customer, I think,
Yep.
and you can check that. Who knows? I would guess that things like user gems and Champify have more extensive knowledge of that, and so like it's a bespoke tool, it's probably better at it. But if you have LinkedIn Sales Navigator, you don't want to spend extra money, click that and see what's going on. Put your ICP in and see who's moved to a company that could still apply. I think it's a great play to do. And there are things that go like even more in depth into this, like Affinity and the Swarm, that really look at the connections. I think Affinity is used more for like VC,
Yeah.
but the Swarm is something where it looks at like your emails, your LinkedIn, and sees like how tight are these actual connections, and you can share it with people who are in your network. So like the connections of, and say like, hey, I just want to do an analysis on your network. If you use this, like I can get a better understanding. And the more you use that, the better it understands like how tight those connections are, and then you can take those steps in order to lean on them and ask. I alluded to this before, but I think the real key with any of this is doing the homework for yourself and saying like, okay, I'm going to look at my VC, I'm going to look at their portfolio companies, I'm going to see who fits the criteria of my ICP, whether that's technical criteria or just, firmographic information, whatever the case may be. Then I'm going to find the person within that company that I would like to be introduced to. I'm going to draft that email on behalf of my VC, send them a list and say, hey, listen, all you got to do is send this email. Like I already have it typed out for you. Please, will you do this? And somebody who's not going to take those steps, especially somebody who's invested, like a leader, like a VC, I mean, if they're not going to take those steps, they really don't give a shit about the company being successful. So
Yeah.
for the most part, they'll make those introductions, especially if you've laid that groundwork. If you just give them a list of all their portfolio companies, or you just say, hey, who do you know? You can expect probably similar results of that. And the same comes for a customer that you've just worked with. Look at their connections, right? You just connected with them. A lot of folks might be selling to other salespeople, but just like you and just like a lot of others. I mean, I was selling before I was doing what I'm doing now. I was selling to developers. You're selling to accountants. Those folks hopefully haven't burned their LinkedIn network to the ground. And so you connect with them on LinkedIn, you see connections of, and you say, hey, listen, I saw that you are connected to this person at this other company. Just curious, like, do you actually know them? And would you be willing to make a introduction? And, it doesn't hurt to ask the question. And if you make it easier, it's going to be really great for the most part, right? Like if they're truly happy and satisfied, then why wouldn't they make that introduction? They're just going to make their colleague, their friend, their peers' life easier with your tool. And then the last thing that I would say is actually my teaser at the beginning is Demonstro, and that's the company that me and my co-founder Carson have been building over the past year. And this is actually kind of like turning sales process on its head. And essentially what you're doing is we have this understanding in the B2B Saas world that, B2B Saas is selling a B2B Saas, right? And there is this like mutual interest in selling to one another. And so what we've done is we've taken if anyone has ever done like the demo for demo switch, and we've productized that. I made it a whole lot easier for folks to actually trade demos with the decision makers in their company. So the best way to explain it is like it's Tinder for B2B SaaS. So if I have my company and I'm a sales rep at my company, Caspian's a sales rep, SDR, whatever the case may be at his company, we can basically go in there and based on ICP or a list that we've uploaded, list out all the companies that we would be interested in, what our ICP is, and if we match, hey, you want to sell to my organization, I want to sell to your organization, we as salespeople can internally champion within our organizations to the decision makers. He's trying to sell to my accounting department, I'm trying to sell to his VP of sales. We can go within our organizations, book those meetings on behalf of one another and trade those demos. And so, you're not relying on cold calling, cold emailing, LinkedIn messaging. You basically can just set your list and forget about it. So I won't plug it any further. Check it out, demonstro.io. But, I'm really excited about this because things have just become noisy and hard. And, this is a new channel for you all to try. So I definitely recommend if you are B2B Saas seller, give it a go. I'll give you free meetings. But yeah, that would be my plug of the day. But really excited about it. So definitely check it out.
Yeah. I will say just before, no, I'm not going to let us move on just yet. I will say for anyone that is in sales and doing any sort of prospecting, that things are noisier than ever, right? If you go anywhere on LinkedIn, there are a lot of there's just a lot of noise, right? And if you log into your inbox, if you look at your phone, the major channels, LinkedIn, email, phone calls are busier and busier. And as we've discussed, it's becoming harder and harder to be noticed and to get to do prospecting, right? That is becoming more challenging. By no means do I believe that those avenues are dead, but it requires up-leveling your outreach. I think that what you are working on, Eric, is so exciting, and I think every seller can benefit from this. So I will plug it like Demonstro. I'm calling it now. Next big thing. I'm super, super pumped to follow your journey, man, and just so excited for you and so proud of you.
Dude, I sincerely appreciate that, man. And you've been super helpful with all the information, advice, and stuff along the way. And so I'm excited it's actually come to fruition and not died in the back of the brain. So enough about that. Again, you can check it out. Just reach out to me. And of course, I'm doing Anthro test labs. I don't think that cold calling, cold email, LinkedIn are dead. I just think that they're harder than ever. So, it's something where I'm trying to solve the problems for folks and, hopefully it works. But anyway, plays of the week. Would love to get your take on, how you are pulling this reference selling, this network selling, the social capital, the social, whatever references into your daily life there, Caspian.
Yeah, I think I'll describe two different ones. One is more like, one is reference selling in terms of, giving social proof. I think something that I've strived to do a better and better job of is not only in outbounding, like in prospecting, but also in active deal cycles, showing people, I think show me that you know me, again, is impactful in a lot of different parts of life. It's helpful during initial outreach. It's also helpful when you finally get someone on a call, right? You want to be able to show people, hey, we've helped people, or companies that look similar to you, right? If you had to go in for, hopefully this metaphor works out, but if you're going in for a speculative surgery because maybe you have, your ear is really itchy, and you're going in for a speculative surgery that you've not heard before, and then as you walk in the room, the doctor tells you, hey, I've never done any sort of procedure like this before. You'd be getting out of there. You'd be booking it, right? On the flip side, if the doctor tells you, hey, we've been noticing more and more people coming in with itchy ear syndrome, and 3 people in the last week have actually been able to do this procedure with, and they've all reported, no itchiness post-surgery. This is how we're thinking about this, and these are the trends that we've seen in terms of an increase and an uptick, and we think this is because of the increase in sugar in cookies. I'm really taking this metaphor way too far. It needs to go. You'd be put much more at ease, right? You'd be like, okay, this person knows how to help me. They've helped people in similar circumstances, and those people have had tangible results. Um, that's what I try to do, right? If I'm working with a fintech company, I want to talk to them about how we've helped fintech companies. And I'll even take a gander at what problems I think they're facing based on their size and their scale. I leave them room to correct me, right? But I strive to be, you know, lead with an opinion.
Yep.
And I think that also kind of shows people that you know them. I say that all to say, not only is there the built-in social proof there, but sometimes, and I've had this happen throughout deal cycles, people know other people at those companies and they may back channel, and that can help move things along. I want to be clear. You want to make sure that, of course, you're being honest, you're being upfront. Ideally, those people that you're referencing are, not only on your product, but happy with your product, because if
Yep.
not, and they back channel, that's not a good approach.
Exactly.
Um, but that can pay dividends, right? Like if you can get people who say, hey, I actually just synced with XYZ team and they couldn't stop talking about how excited they are about working with you guys. That is reference selling in terms of your references are selling on your behalf. And that is
Yeah.
truly what this is all about, right? So that's one item that I've used. And the other one I'll just briefly talk about is, and this is not always it's not a very automated process, but I think we all know people at our own company who are really well connected, and to your point, there are people who have burned their networks that are not good to be like, hey, do you know this person, do you know this person? What I strive to do on a fairly regular basis is I set up time with this person that's very well connected. I go through. I've already looked at my ideal accounts that I want to break into, or accounts that I'm working that I want to get multi-threaded with, and have identified that this person on my team is connected with individuals.
Yep.
We then together in that half hour kind of vet, hey, how well do you know these people? I've drafted up some messages. Do you feel comfortable sending them? Yes, awesome, right? And maybe they give me insight into like, oh, actually, they're not a good prospect because XYZ item, right? Like they're speculative of new software, whatever the case may be, right? So those are my two plays that I'm running with on an ongoing basis. What about yourself, Eric?
Yeah, so I think like a big one, and I think we've alluded to like pieces and parts of this before, but um, we were running a campaign that basically was taking Gong's sentiment analysis, right? So like you would have your customer success calls, they would take the sentiment analysis, and basically we would filter for like you've worked with us for about 3 months or so, just to like confirm like, hey, like you're using the product and whatever. You can also pair this with like any sort of like product data that you have, like if you're using something like Pendo or whatever, to understand how much this person is using the tool. You have your like QBR or whatever the case may be as CS meets up with the person and is getting good feedback. We'd put those triggers in Gong to say like, hey, sentiment analysis says that this person is using this like quite a bit, and is very favorable to the value that they're getting out of it. And what we would do is we would pair that with Clay to basically understand just what we're saying. Who are the connections of this person that fit our ICP criteria to run it through? You also definitely want to check just with the CS rep so that you're not getting like, before you do the reach out, some crazy information. But essentially it would be, we get that positive sentiment. We've been working with them for 3 months. We check with the CS person. We see that they have connections of companies that are within our prospect accounts. So, Clay's connected to the CRM, understand who that is, draft up a message, and you can have that pulled together with Clay as well. And basically then you go to the CS rep. If you still have a good relationship with the person, you can go directly to them, but you come back to the CS rep. Hey, listen, I drafted up a couple of notes for a couple of contacts at a couple of my prospect companies. Would love to see if they can make any of these connections. And again, right, it's like building on what we said before. Here's the information of the relationship. Here's the information of how you can get to them, and then you can just like take it from there to say like, it's not going to work every time, but if you did the legwork and says like, hey, John Smith, Jane Doe, and this other person, can you make some introductions? Well, I don't know these two, but I'd be happy to introduce you to this third. it really just cuts down all the work that you have to do, gets you right into that meeting, bypass those cold calls and stuff that probably weren't working because you're probably calling that account and you're emailing that account, and all it took was John Smith to make that intro. So that was really like one of the plays where we're taking, we'll call it like first person data from all these different sources and really filtering it down to say like, well, where is my low hanging fruit from all of this information, and how can I get to it? So I think that was super successful for us. But that is something that like you can run as a playbook. That's kind of an ongoing activity. Curious of the sales that doesn't scale. What's something that you've done that's kind of wacky or weird that has worked when it comes to your reference selling?
I would say some of the weirdest stuff I've done is honestly a little bit luck related in that my parents used to live very close. Now it's very odd, and I only know this because basically there was an account I was trying to break into, and my mom happened to know this CRO's wife, and so I was able to get an introduction to this CRO. I don't actually know if Gong knows this, but there's I won't say which meeting, but there was a meeting that I booked that my mom was instrumental in booking. She knew the CRO's wife, was able to get an introduction to the CRO that then I was able to leverage to book a meeting. So you just gotta have well-connected moms. It's not about who you know; it's about who your mom knows. You know?
Mrs. Lukey, the BDR for Caspian.
Exactly. No, it's the family that books meetings is a tight knit family.
I love it, man. I love it. Yeah. So I think for mine, we actually at one company ran a bounty system, and the reason it doesn't scale is because like you basically peter out. Like it's a good front loaded effort, but it kind of trickles in after that. But basically how it worked was if you were not in a revenue organization, so like sales or marketing, who, your commissions or your, whatever, your compensation is based on driving those meetings. We basically put out a bounty system that said like, we'll give you the equivalent of, a meeting for an SDR, like $250, $350, whatever it was that we were paying for meetings, for anyone else to book a meeting with their network. So we put out this bounty system, and at the time I forget who we were selling to. Maybe it was like devs or something else. But basically, we leaned hard on the developers at our organization to say like, hit up your network, but it was open to everybody, like legal, finance, what have you. And essentially, you could just make some extra side money, right? That was like, hey, I know 5 or 6 people, if they took the meeting and it was a qualified meeting, then we would pay out. And I think that this was like a really good strategy, because at the end of the day, you're willing to pay SDRs this, like, a meeting's a meeting. If you've done your math, then this should make sense, because if you're willing to pay a salesperson for this, you should be able to pay somebody else for this. And it was really successful. But again, like their network is their network. Maybe they add like one more person down the line sporadically. But I think, when you open up your entire organization to be revenue focused, that's when you're really like capitalizing on the fact that like, we all want this company to be successful. We all, especially if you're at a startup, we all want it to be worth something someday. The easiest way to do that is like, it's outside of your purview, and we understand that you're not, you have to be incentivized in some small way to do this. And so we put that incentive down, and it was really successful. So I think it's a great thing. And, I think my thesis more and more is that all people within an organization should be revenue focused, because at the end of the day, if you say that like, that's not my job or whatever the case is, if you can't do that one small thing, like, you really aren't invested in the success of your company. And unfortunately, it may suffer because of it. You never know, the guy in finance, he knows one person, and that could be a, triple digit deal. And that could have been the difference of making the number for the quarter and not. And so I think if you can get that buy-in, whether you have to incentivize it or it's part of your company culture, I think that that's like the new way that a lot of people are going to be successful when it comes to, does my company fail and we all get laid off, or do we make it to live another day and get another round of funding and keep moving? So
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think there's no better way to end an episode than with a hot take for the cold rush. So, what is your hot take for the week?
yeah, so my hot take, uh, so basically, I guess, like, how many barbecues do you go to a year?
Mm, uh, does a paella making session count as a barbecue?
See, this is my whole thing. I would say that probably you go to zero barbecues a year. You might go to
Okay.
like one or two. And the
Okay.
reason is because a barbecue involves barbecued food. So like
Yeah.
smoked meats and steaks and like whatever. A cookout is when you're flipping burgers and dogs and whatever. And so
Mm,
my hot take is that everybody who thinks that they're going to barbecues on July 4th and whatever are just categorically wrong. It is a cookout, it is not a barbecue.
I've never heard someone make that distinction, but I love it.
Yeah, it's, maybe it's a hot take, maybe it's a pet peeve of mine, but yeah, it's very different. And I feel like I've lived all over and went to school in North Carolina. I was born in Georgia, and there is a very big distinction in those, barbecue, brisket, pulled pork states that, you know, call it what it is. You're flipping
Yeah.
burgers. You're not, you're not an artisan here.
I like that.
What's
Um,
yours?
mine is similarly that like this is not that. Um, gore to me. So I love horror
Yeah.
movies. Gore is not horror to me. I think it is its own category. It's like gore if you really want to contribute at that. I think so this happened to me recently. On Friday I watched the new VHS. I don't know if you've seen like the VHS
I've seen
movies.
the old ones. Yeah.
Yeah, which I love. They're like, little vignettes. I'm very, I think they're generally speaking well done. I just saw the new VHS Halloween, and it is well done. It got a 95% on Rotten Tomatoes, but damn, was it gory. And literally at the end of it, my girlfriend and I were like, I'm kind of nauseous. Like,
Yeah.
I do
Yeah.
not feel good. And that's just where, to me, and sometimes I think this has been said about jump scares in horror, but I will apply it to gore, where they're like, jump doing a jump scare in horror is like tickling someone and saying you're laughing, I'm funny. To me that's the same thing for gore,
Sure.
where it's like gore is, to me it's like it's a cheap trick. It does not require like masterful cinematography. You can argue that there's like more and less campy versions of gore, and I know some people like the campy version. Again, I just think gore, sure, you can gross someone out, but I wouldn't, if the purpose of horror is to make people feel afraid or to
Hmm.
cause them to think, um, that to me, like being grossed out is not fear. I'm not impressed by that. I think that it is a really low bar. Um, and again, if gore's your thing, more power to you. I
Totally.
just don't think, and that's totally fine if you like gore. I
Hmm.
just don't think that really should fit in the horror camp. I think it should be its own classification. So that is my thing. And that is also maybe similarly a pet peeve of mine, is I'm just like not impressed by it. Not impressed at all.
Well, I will say in the last week, because it is the spooky season, I've watched two gore movies.
Ooh.
I've seen The Substance, which was
Oh, I've heard of that, but I haven't seen it.
a bit, and I thought, hey, this is like body horror, whatever, and it was freaky. And then I watched Bring Her Back,
Mm.
and man,
I've heard of Bring It Back. I have not seen it, but my friend recommended it to my brother, and my brother was like, I hated it. I don't
yeah.
know if my friend knows that. I hope he's not listening if he is. But yeah, he did not. My brother did not like that movie.
That is a rough watch, man. It is some heavy content in there. But
Damn.
yeah, it's It was the same people as Talk to Me, which was also pretty
Oh,
heavy. I feel like they're in the genre of like grief horror,
yeah.
which like started like I feel like Hereditary kind
Hmm.
of started doing
Hereditary is
this, and
crazy.
then Midsummer started doing
Yeah.
that, right? And then these just take it to the nth degree. So, um, yeah, the some tough watches, but hey, I'm in it for Halloween. So,
Good
but
to see.
anyway, let's wrap this up. I think this was hopefully a useful episode for everybody out there. And realistically, man, we made it to episode 6. I know you're banging the drum of 10 and then 10,000, and we're well on our way. So who knew it would get this far? And I'm pretty excited about it.
Well, I'm excited about it too. And again, for everyone listening, go check out Damon's show. You don't want to be late to this ship, right? I'm sure we've all said, damn, I wish I could have, been a part of XYZ thing before it was big. Now is your chance. You have the opportunity. What are you doing? Why are you still listening to this? Go check out Damon's show. That's my plug.
I love it, man. I love it. Yeah, just check us out, demonstro.io. And then, of course, like and subscribe. Share this episode with your friends. Share the past episodes for the Cold Rush podcast. We really appreciate everybody who's listened thus far, and more content to come.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.